Let me ask you a question. If you are guilty of having said or done something wrong, what's your reaction going to be? And what should your reaction be? Are you trying to justify, to explain, to deny, perhaps to color the story somewhat? Or would you admit? And would you say, yes, I did it, I said it, I'm sorry, and I will make amends if amends need to be done? Well, I like to begin today with an example of this world where this is not being done at all. And it can serve us as a guidance insofar as not how to act. You probably heard about the video which was posted by Donald Trump on his Youth social network, where, amongst other things, at the end, Barack and his wife's, Michelle Obama's, pictures were shown, but just the head, and then the rest was the body of an ape, or two apes. Now this caused tremendous uproar, and even Republicans absolutely felt disgusted by it. The only black Republican in the Senate, Tim Scott, said that this has to be the most racist thing I have seen out of this White House. And it is remarkable because Tim Scott is a close supporter, normally, of Donald Trump. And then other Republicans also strongly took umbrage with that posting. And so here was a chance for the White House to do something productive, but just the opposite happened. The White House acknowledged that Trump posted the video and then defended the president for doing so. Well, matters got worse. Several Republican senators spoke up. And then finally, Donald Trump deleted the video, but didn't apologize. He actually said, it was one of my staffers who is to be blamed. The Daily Mail wrote, Trump deletes Obama ape video as White House throws junior staffer under the bus. And then Mr. Trump came back and said, well, I saw only part of the video, then passed it on to the staffer, and he should have stopped it. Well, do you really believe in a lifetime that a staffer would stop a video Mr. Trump asked him to post? So that is remarkable because it's so embarrassing and so shameful. You know, he could have easily at least apologized and saying, well, it was a mistake. But he said, no, I didn't make any mistake. It was the staffer's fault. It's a good example for all of us as to not to behave. If we do something wrong, we have to have the guts to stand up for what we did and live with the consequences. You know, maybe many times it's not the best to say anything to begin with. I mean, you hear a rumor. Do you pass the rumor on? First of all, you shouldn't unless you check the veracity of what you are passing on. Otherwise, you are guilty of lying if the rumor turns out to be untrue. Many times it's better not to do anything, not to say anything, not to pass on any information you might have gotten. You know, it says a fool may even be looked upon as wise if he keeps his mouth shut. And it also says, in a multitude of words there is sin not lacking. And that brings me to the next point I'd like to bring up. And we all, of course, have been hearing about the situation with Nancy Guthrie, an apparent kidnapping. And it looks like there's really not much of a lead as to who is a kidnapper. It's a terrible situation. But what really makes me extremely upset in a sense is the fact that you turn on the stations and they keep talking and talking and talking and talking about it, debating it, saying, oh, now we found this leak, or maybe we didn't find it, we didn't find this one. And, you know, everything which is being said, the kidnapper, whoever it is, hears that too. Hears that too. I mean, how stupid can that be? Rather than keeping your mouth shut and letting the police do what they are doing, we need to know everything when an investigation is ongoing. This might endanger the life of Nancy Guthrie. And if you heard the video message by the children, I mean, that was so stirring. It was so really heartbreaking. And whoever that kidnapper is, you know, we are not for the death penalty. We understand that. As Christians, we are doing the administration of life, not of death. But under Old Testament law, you know what would happen to this guy, assuming it's a guy. It's a terrible thing. I mean, here's somebody who is absolutely irresponsible. And I recently heard a message from the mayor of New York talking about somebody who committed a heinous crime, a murder. And the mayor said, well, you know, he probably is insane, so he shouldn't be prosecuted, and he should probably be held innocent for reason of insanity. You look at the laws in the Bible, you don't find anywhere that somebody can be excused for reason of insanity. He committed a murder, the penalty is clear. We are living in a world devoid of justice. But when Jesus Christ comes back, all of this will change. All of this will change. And having said these and made these introductory comments, I'd like to go to the update, 1194. The editorial this time was written by Our Thorn in the Flesh by Michael Link. I'd like to read a few excerpts from this editorial. He says, we all go through pain and suffering, some more than others. And when we go through it personally, it can be quite debilitating. It affects us physically, our energy, appetite, and our ability to function properly, thereby impacting our work. It affects us mentally, impairing our concentration, our moods, our behavior. And how true that is. How true that is. I mean, if you have gone through any sickness, going through any suffering, and unfortunately there are so many right now who are going through it, boy, it does affect us, doesn't it? You can't think as straight any longer as you maybe normally would do. You can't concentrate any longer as you would normally do. He goes on to say at the very end of this editorial, whatever our particular thorn in the flesh may be, God knows all about it and will take care of us according to his purpose, ensuring that we will ultimately succeed if we allow him to. And that is also very important, because sometimes we don't want to accept what we are going through. And we should always remember the fact that God knows all about it. And he could intervene the second if he wanted to. But there may be a reason for the delay. We need to patiently wait. A lot of sickness is going on. A lot of trials. Of course, we are getting closer to Passover. Still, we all can, as a body, pray to God to please intervene mightily and powerfully and to bring this kind of suffering to an end according to his will. God certainly can do that, and he does hear our prayers. When it comes to the current events, we are talking about the situation in Minnesota, but I'm not going to go into that because we spoke about that last week when I was speaking here. We also talk about the Epstein debacle, and we published an article here by the Jerusalem Post on February 1. The details of what is being stated in this article I will not go into, and certainly not here from the pulpit. But I would encourage all of you to read that article. It's an eye-opener, again, showing in what terrible state this world is in. We also talk about the situation in Europe. Again, I talked about this last time. But here's an article which was published by The Hill, dated January 29, having to do with Ukraine. The article was titled, "Trump Sleepwalks into a Forever War in Europe." And they go through the history of the negotiations, and they say the US is now 0 for 7 in its negotiations with Russia to end the war. In other words, they have lost 7 times by now against Russia. It goes on to say, for now, the sticking point is the Donbass. Russia wants it. Ukraine says no, no way. The article concludes by saying Trump has the cards to end the war, but those cards need to be played against Russia and not against Ukraine. And a follow-up article by the US Sun stated on February 3 that if they ever come to a ceasefire agreement and then Russia breaks it, that is what was agreed to by the United States and apparently Ukraine and Europe. It would start with a diplomatic warning. Oh, great, diplomatic warning. If the war continues, the fighting, a second phase would be initiated involving the military intervention from the coalition of the willing, that would include European countries. And if that still doesn't do it, then a Western-backed military coalition involving US forces would step in after 3 days if the ceasefire developed into a wider attack. Now, Russia came right back saying any foreign military deployment to Ukraine would be treated as unacceptable foreign intervention and legitimate targets in ongoing fighting. So can you ever believe for one moment that that agreement would be accepted by Russia? Or even by Ukraine if the idea is like they have to give up Donbass. So this thing is going on and on and on and on and on. But we know the outcome, don't we? Ultimately, Ukraine and Russia will be together against Europe. Nobody seems to know that because nobody seems to understand the Bible. We also pointed out the terrible death toll of 70,000. 70,000 have died in Gaza since the invasion of Israel by the Hamas militants. And both sides agreed to that figure. 7,000 people have died. We also have a new standing watch out, and I'd like to just read to you the title and also the summary. The title is "The Third Temple Coming Soon?" Will the Third Temple be built soon, or is it being delayed? This program discusses developments showing an indirect relationship to the Third Temple, as well as direct orders to build the temple. However, we also show that some who are responsible for building the temple seem to hesitate and thereby delay biblical prophecy. But God won't tolerate this much longer. Now, if you haven't heard the program and if you wonder who those people are who are responsible for building the temple and don't do it, well, you got to listen to the program. This time I didn't allow comments because every time I do allow comments when it comes to building the temple, there are some blank people out there, and then they give us their vision and their wisdom. No, there's not going to be a third temple. It's not going to be any temple prior to Christ's return. When it talks about a third temple in the Bible, oh, that's just figurative, and all that kind of nonsense. Again, people just don't understand and know the Bible. And because they don't, they are ignorant as to what biblical prophecy is all about. We have the same program in German. The news and prophecy statements by myself regarding Germany's continuing rise in Europe. I'd like to quickly read the summary for that one. We say in here, are you despairing of life? In light of the terrible developments in this world, this might be easy to do. But as Christians, we must not fall into that trap. Now, this doesn't mean that we close our eyes and ignore what is happening in this world, as these are signs for the soon coming return of Jesus Christ. And then in this program, we go into some of these developments. So Q&A. Can you explain Christ's family relationship with many of his early disciples? Now, this one, let me just say, took me a lot of time to put together. Hours upon hours. So, you take the time and read it. Otherwise, I've wasted my time. We start with talking about the fact that Christ did have half-brothers and half-sisters. And then we also point out what we know, what tradition tells us, what happened to those half-brothers after Christ died and was resurrected, at least some of them. And then we are talking about some other family relationships between Christ and, for instance, some of his disciples, pointing out that there are actually 4 women mentioned in the Bible, those who are at the cross and who came to the grave after the cross, all with the name of Mary. Of course, you have Mary, the mother of Jesus. You have Mary Magdalene. You have Mary, the mother of James the Less and of Joseph. And then you have Salome, who we also identify as Mary, the mother of the sons of Zebedee. And then there are other Marys mentioned in the Bible. There is the Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. By the way, she was not identical with Mary Magdalene, although the Catholic Church erroneously teaches that. Then we have another Mary who wasn't present at the crucifixion, but she was the mother of John Mark. John Mark, a relative of Barnabas. And then we have one more Mary. She is mentioned in Romans. We don't know much about her otherwise. So there are lots of Marys. So how do you distinguish all of those? Some have told me, well, there are so many Marys, you don't even know what Mary we are talking about. And how are these Marys, some of them, related to Mary, the mother of Jesus? And how does that mean that Jesus Christ was, in fact, a relative to some of them, like James and John? Cousins. And so that makes it very clear as to why, for instance, Christ said to John, take care of my mother. Why the mother of the Zebedees, or the sons of the Zebedees, came to Christ and said, well, please have my sons sit next to you on your throne, because they were all blood relatives, you see. So anyhow, this is all breaking it down in this Q&A. So if you haven't read it, studied it, go ahead and do so. Right now working on another series. Started the first installment already, and that is about the Apostle Paul, because there's also a lot to be said about him. But before I close, I just want to say 2 more things regarding world developments. You probably didn't hear too much about it in this country, but German Chancellor Friedrich Merz went to the Gulf region in Abu Dhabi to work out some very interesting treaties and agreements with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. And he said, after he talked to the Emir of Qatar, that Germany would work more intensively in arms cooperation with those reliable partners in the Gulf region. Of course, the Bible tells you very clearly that ultimately Germany will be part of a confederation of Arab nations against Israel. And then another article, you might have heard about that phone conversation President Trump had with China's President Xi Jinping. It was a great phone conversation, we are being told. Well, the Chinese president warned Trump that he should handle arms sales to Taiwan with caution, describing the future of the island Taiwan as the most important issue in China-US relations. And he said that Taiwan is Chinese territory, and we will never allow Taiwan to be separated from China. So, as we have said for a while, it appears that if we see the signs of the times correctly, China is ultimately going to invade Taiwan. I don't think they're going to wait until Mr. Trump is no longer the president.